Hi friends from the Boys and Girls Club. This is Miss JoAnne from the Boys and Girls Club of Southeast Louisiana. I hope you all are doing well. Today we are in a new biome, and I say biome because habitats are part of a biome, and this particular one is a very large one. As you can see behind me, we are in a desert, and this is probably what you think of when you think of a desert. You think of sand, you think of someplace dry, maybe some camels, and you would partly be correct. There are many different kinds of deserts. Now, every continent in the world has desert area, including the United States. 1/5 of the Earth's surface is covered in a desert. That's a good amount of space and a good amount of area. So what is a desert exactly? What really defines a desert is not the fact that it's just hot or that it just is covered in sand, but that less than 10 inches of rain fall there yearly. Now think about that. 10 inches about this big. To give you perspective, we get on average 64 inches of rain in New Orleans a year. That's how tall I am, 5'4" inches. So that's a lot of rain. So what makes a desert essentially is the lack of rain, the lack of humidity. In fact, in some areas, the area is so dry that the rain dries up before it even hits the ground. So most deserts are these sandy, dry places, but they also oftentimes cool down at night. Now, there are 4 different kinds of deserts. We have the subtropical. Now, those are the really hot deserts. And then we have the semi-arid. Now, those are usually near tall mountains, and there's a reason because the rain doesn't fall on the other side of the mountain, and those are created. We have some of those in the United States as well. And finally, they're coastal, like the one alongside Chile. And there are polar deserts. Yes, remember when we talked about a few weeks ago about the Arctic and Antarctic, how they are frozen areas, yet they get almost no rain, definitely less than 10 inches. So we know that there are different kinds of deserts. Now, like I said, there are deserts in North America, South America, Asia, Africa, Australia, and of course, the North Pole and South Pole. Now, the largest and the hottest desert is the Sahara Desert, and that is in northern Africa. And it can get up to temperatures of 120 degrees. But on the flip side, there's a desert in the northern part of Asia called the Gobi Desert, and it gets really cold, less than 0. So as you can see, there are different kinds of deserts. Now, the deserts that we have here in the United States, there's 4 of them. There's the Mojave Desert. Now, these are almost all out west in the area like California, Arizona, New Mexico, those areas. So we have the Mojave, the Great Basin, the JoAnne, and the Sonoma deserts. Those are the 4 deserts that we have here. Now, like I said, deserts are often thought to be sandy areas, and they can be. And mostly the reason they are is because years and years are wearing down at the rock that is in deserts. So here's an example of a very sandy desert. Now, in a sandy desert, you're going to find dunes, kind of these like these back here. You also might see, because of the wind, it moves the sand. In fact, there can actually be sandstorms. And you might see little ripples that almost look like water, but that's the way that the sand is. So here's an example of how the sand might look. But not all are sandy. Many can be very rocky. And they can make very beautiful areas. Again, very dry, oftentimes very hot. And here are some more rocky deserts. All right. One of the things that's really interesting to me about deserts are the fact that there can be something called an oasis. Now, an oasis is an area of green, an area around water that can be right in the middle of a very dry desert. So how does that happen? How can you have almost like a pool of water with beautiful date trees and olive trees and sometimes lemon trees, and animals come to drink? How can that happen? Well, you see, most of those occur kind of in a lower part of the desert. So that means the water has a tendency to come down just like a funnel. Also below, the water level is higher because the ground is lower. So water can come up and oases can form. So these are how we can have oases in the deserts. Now, we've already established the fact that deserts can be very hard places to live. The temperatures can be very high, and they can be very low, and there's very little water. So it makes it difficult for life, but not impossible. There are animals that live in the desert, many of them, and they've been able to adapt to be able to live in the desert. For example, there are camels that live in the desert. Now, camels can be, there are two different kinds. There is the back-trained camel, which has the 2 humps, or the dromedary, which has 1 hump. Now, they have actually been able to get used to life in the desert for a number of different ways. First of all, as you can see on the back of a camel, there's either 1 hump or 2 humps. Now, a lot of people think that's the water. It's actually not water that they're storing there. They can go over a week without drinking water, but that is where they store fat, in that big hump or the 2 humps on their back. Once they've used up all that fat or that storage of energy and food, the hump actually flops over. That's true. But in order to be able to live in the deserts, they've also have very interesting feet that are in 2 parts that allow them to walk on the desert ground without sinking in. When they do drink water, they can drink up to 30 gallons. Think about that, 30 gallons of water in less than 10 minutes. That's how much they can drink, and they can store that in their body. So they can go more than a week. Another thing that's interesting about camels is that they are able to, because of the blowing sand, they can close off their nostrils and put something over their eyes in order to protect them from it. They also have fur on their skin on their body that allows them to protect them from the heat and the sun. It also keeps them warm when the temperatures drop in the evenings, as they often do. So there's lots of different kinds of animals that live in the deserts. So this is a fennec fox right here. Now they can go a long time without drinking water as well. They come, they get their food and they get water from their fruit and leaves, and they have a kidneys, which is what processes their the food that they or the water that they drink. They can store water for a long time. So that's a fennec fox. Also, you'll notice the tall ears. It's able to release a lot of the heat through his ears. Another kind of animal that lives, that you might see in the desert, is a jackrabbit. Now, a jackrabbit is the same way. Now, rabbits do something interesting along with some of the other animals that are in the desert. They burrow down. That means they make little holes under the ground where it's a little cooler, damper, and they make a little burrow where they can stay cool, and they come out at night, so they're nocturnal when the temperatures have gotten better. But he also has some very tall ears that allow heat to be released from his body. Now, snakes are often very common. The rattlesnake is very, very common, and the viper are very, very common in the deserts, particularly in North America. We'll see a lot of those. There are also some really cool lizards called Gila monsters. Now, they stay out in the sun some of the time, but they also go into holes some of the time when they need to. They store fat in their tails too, so they don't have to eat but every 2 months. So that's one of the ways they have adapted to living in the desert. So when we go on, we talk about animals, but how do plants survive? Talk about animals, but how do plants survive? Now, there are a lot of different kinds of plants that can live in different kinds of deserts. Oftentimes you're going to see like sagebrush, kind of small shrubs, but there is this kind of plant, it's called a succulent, that can live in the desert. Right next to me, I have bought 3 different succulents. Now, succulents are able to store water within their leaves. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pinch off a couple of these leaves off these succulents, and we are going to squeeze it and see how much water comes out here. So this is a succulent. Its leaf is nice and thick, and so if I were to squeeze it, I could actually get water coming out of it. Succulents keep that water inside their leaves in order to have it when it's very, very dry. Let's try this one as well. So this succulent is also a very thick and waxy exterior. Often the wax exterior is there so the water will not evaporate from it. Now, cactus or cacti is more than one cactus, is a kind of succulent. And oftentimes you will see on the outside of a cactus, these stickly, prickly things that almost look like, toothpicks. And that's to protect the cactus, because the cactus can be eaten by animals that need water. So it is a kind of succulent. Now, the way they can live and they can grow is that cactus have very, very deep, deep roots that go down, down, down into the ground. Thick roots that can keep the water. Now, you'll sometimes see cactus that have what's called like an arm. We're going to see those in just a minute. And that takes like 75 years to grow. And sometimes even in the desert, you'll see animals burrow into the cactus and make its own home there. Now, sometimes we'll see some blooming plants. So what will happen is during the dry period, seeds will dry up and they'll blow around off of the plants. When the rain does come, a little bit of rain does come, you will see flowering plants that will occur in the rainforest. So they can be a very interesting and full of life place, deserts can. So let's take a look. If you want to make some art projects around deserts, there's a few things that you might be able to make. Now, one of the animals I find really, really interesting is called a roadrunner. Did you know those are real? They're roadrunners. So this roadrunner is eating a small, looks like about a mouse that's found in the desert, and it has long legs and it can run really fast, like up to 35 miles an hour. So one of the things that we could make would be a roadrunner. And you know how Miss JoAnne likes plates. You pretty much just paint your plate. I added a little bit of a feather there, a nose, and these long legs because they have long legs. All right, another craft you could make. I used my handprint, but I made a succulent, a kind of cactus, if you will. And I went ahead and added some flowers because many cactus are flowering cactus. I simply painted my own hand, put it on the paper, and then I added some flowers on there. Now here's another different kind of cactus that I was talking about. We call these arms of cactus. Now we talked about how there are pricklies on the outside of the cactus. I decided to do a couple different things. One of the kinds of pricklies I added was I simply painted rice, and it kind of looks like the prickly outside. And when I say prickly, these are really sharp little thorns. The other way I was able to make something that looked like prickly thorns is I simply used a plastic fork and I put it in paint and I made some of the pricklies right now. Very, very easy. Now finally, I made a snake. Now we made a snake before, and let me say this, I made my snake very colorful. The snakes that are going to be found in the desert are going to be a brown or tan color because you know that they have to be camouflaged in order not to be attacked by prey. But I wanted to make a really colorful one. So I took this noodle, which is called a rigatoni noodle, and I painted a bunch of them. See, it simply is just a noodle. And you can take whatever you want. You could take a shoestring, you could take a piece of yarn. I'm actually using some pipe cleaners here. And I strung them to look like a snake. I put a head on it. Now, what would be really cool is if you wanted to put some kind of a rattler, because that is the kind that's very, very common in the United States that you'll see in like the Mojave Desert, the Sonoran Desert, are going to be your rattlesnakes. So there's a few different kinds of crafts that you can work on. You can also make any of the animals. Now, one last thing I wanted to show you is we did talk a little bit about some of the cactus and how when it rains that they can collect water as well. So let's take a look at some of the cactus right here. And I want to explain to you how that works. So some cactus are able to expand. So you might have a cactus out in the middle of the desert like this. But as it gets water, as it collects water, it is able to expand and expand and expand to take on that water, just like that. So you have a smaller cactus, it's able to take on water, and it expands and expands to hold the water. I hope you all learned a little bit more about deserts. I hope you all are having a great summer and enjoying our videos, and I will see you soon. Bye.